Lost in modernity, we just sort of drift, swallowed by Saturn, charmed half to sleep by consumption, never initiated into anything larger. So how do we get out? That, my friends, is what we are going to explore today, to remember our way back to who we are, what it means to be us, and how we might actually become us again. To do so, we have to start at the end of the world. Ironically enough, Thor kills Jormungandr, the world serpent. It is so vast that it wraps around the entire earth and could bite down its own tail. At the point in the story where we meet it, at Ragnarök, it rises out of the sea, and Thor walks out to meet it alone. Not Odin the king, nor Tyr the lawgiver. Thor, the god of farmers, the god of free men, the god you pray to when the wolf is at the door and nobody important is going to come for help. One great and mighty blow, and the hammer crushes its skull. He doesn't really walk away clean though. 9 steps is all that he gets, and then he falls down dead. The serpent's venom takes its price. 9 steps, that's the thankless wage for his work. The Norse did not imagine a retirement for their greatest hero. No victory lap, no book deal, not even a podcast tour. He wins, the winning kills him. And the world is reborn anyway. Green fields rise out of the sea. A new sun crosses the sky, daughter of the old one. And the sons of the dead gods walk out into the grass and find, lying there in the morning light, the golden game pieces their fathers once played with before the world ended. Nearly every culture on this planet told some version of the story. The hero, the serpent, the death that becomes a foundation. We are the only ones who stopped telling it. For us, the serpent is a social construct, the hammer is toxic, and the 9 steps after are a clear proof that sacrifice is not worth it. But if we want to put ourselves in the right direction, then this story has to be understood. It is why we are here today. And, just so it doesn't stay at the level of pretty pictures and nice feelings, we're going to build it slowly, step by step, into a posture that one can actually take up on Monday morning. Now, the last entries in this series are a while back now, but they have covered quite a lot of ground. In my admittedly somewhat dated Father series, we uncovered the vertical axis, hierarchy, conscience, law, something that stands above us, that we did not really invent and cannot vote out of office. The Father is the backbone of the world, the reason there is order at all. Even the plants orient themselves upward, and we saw what happens when this archetype goes sick. It becomes the tyrant, the devouring father. Saturn, the god of time, who eats his own children before they can take his place. It is a civilization under Saturn that permits exactly one mode of existence: purposeful, productive, supervised, and safe. And everything in you that might one day grow tall enough to challenge him gets sedated. The answer to that was the wolf's den that we went down into the basements for. The image boards, the lobbies at 3 in the morning, the anonymous night spaces where a generation of fatherless boys is trying to initiate itself. And what we found down there was the ghost of the Kurios, the wolf band, that ancient ritual descent that every Indo-European culture used to turn boys into men. But whoever stays in the den past his time doesn't really grow up. Which brings us to the problem that this whole journey has been running toward. Modernity offers us exactly 2 fates: to stay a child forever under Saturn's fluorescent lights, or rot in the den with the other lost boys. Permanent kindergarten or permanent basement. 2 flavors of the same never growing up. There is, however, as one might guess, a third figure between the child and the father. Between the one who is handed the world and the one who carries it stands the son. You do not become the archetypal father by aging, however, as aging is unavoidable. Being a father, however, is not. There are plenty of 60-year-olds who are still children, even if they themselves have fathered children. Some of them run our institutions. The only road to the father runs through the son. Before you can carry a world, you first have to go out and conquer one. That is what today's video is going to be about. How the sun does it, and why that exact thing has to be the meaning of our lives. See, the Father stands above the world, the Sun walks through it. It strikes me as a kind of cosmic geometry. The Father is the vertical axis of existence, eternal order, the standard against which everything is measured. The Sun is the horizontal movement, becoming, time, exploration, and adventure. The Father is what ought to be. The Sun is the thing that drags what is a little closer to what ought to be, on foot through the mud against the resistance of time. Every heroic tradition on Earth opens the very same way, with a departure. The Kurios boys are driven out of the village, out to the margins, into the wild. Abraham hears the call of God to go out from your country, and from your father's house, into a land that you have never seen. Siddhartha climbs the palace wall that his father has built specifically so the boy would never see sickness, age, or death. Once he's over, he sees all three before breakfast. Even Hollywood still knows this, in its very own special lobotomized way. They stamp the hero's journey onto every product they can ship, and even in this degraded, market-tested form, the thing still works. Audiences who believe in nothing at all still feel in their very spine that there is something deeper there, because none of this is really a formula. It's the shape of human life, the call, the departure, the trial. You can commercialize that, but you can't really kill it. The important thing to understand about the departure is that the sun does not really inherit a finished world. He instead inherits a broken one, and that is not a design flaw. We love to preach to ourselves that we are born too late to discover anything. The borders are mapped, the dragons are catalogued, the institutions are captured, the woman on apps, the wages are a joke. Everything real has happened before we even got here, and all that is really left to do is to watch the decline with a drink in your hand. It's the most seductive cope on the market, and half of the people selling it are probably listening right now. Don't you think for a second that I'm unfamiliar with all the black pills out there? It could not be further from the truth. The sun, meaning us, never arrives on time, the finished world. Every hero worth the name is born into the mess. Not a finished hero, in fact, but a fool into the occupied country, the usurped kingdom, the poisoned land, the world that the serpent already has wrapped around. The disorder is not evidence that we missed our moment. It is instead the moment itself. It is addressed to you personally. You were not born too late, nor too early. You were born into exactly the kind of ruin that is yours to overcome. And a man who has understood this once stops grieving for a world that he didn't get and starts surveying the one that he did. That's our first building block, the assignment itself. The broken world is not an insult. It is what makes everything that follows a duty. The Father calls us from above. He calls the oldest name in history, and we are the ones who have to answer, down from the foot of the mountain. Every son of every people meets the same enemy. It's the serpent, in whatever form you can think of, an all-devouring maw with no beginning and no end. In the north, we find Jormungandr, coiled around Midgard, and down in the dark, Nidhöggr, gnawing forever at the root of the world tree. In Egypt, Apophis, the serpent of dissolution, attacking the sun's bark every single night, which is why the priests got up before every dawn to ritually take a side. The side of the light, naturally, because the universe was never guaranteed. In India, Vritra, the dragon who hoards the waters of the world, until Indra splits him open and the rivers run again, so that the Indians can pollute the rivers. Oh well. In Babylon, we have Tiamat, the dragon of chaos and salt water, out of whose body the storm god Marduk builds the ordered heavens, an image that later seeps deep into the Bible when Yahweh smashes the heads of the Leviathan. In Greece, Python at Delphi, killed by Apollo before the light could speak. In the Bible, the serpent in the garden, Leviathan in the deep, the dragon of the apocalypse, and naturally, in nearly every village church in Europe, Saint George. Lance lowered, dragon underfoot. Plenty of people will write all of this off as more or less coincidence and accuse me of cognitive bias. Fine by me, but it's awfully conspicuous, isn't it? Even the motives and the actions translate into one another. The serpent poisons the tree, swallows the sun and blocks the rivers. It stops the world from continuing. It stops the world from continuing. What gets attacked is never the proud warrior, it's the order itself. The serpent doesn't want to win a duel. The serpent wants the world to stop being a world. Now, what these myths are actually encoding is the hardest realism there is. Order decays on its own. Chaos is the natural state of the world. Hence, incidentally, the feminine connotation to chaos, since nature and woman are what ultimately decide whether the offspring continue. Natural chaos is where everything slides the moment attention lapses. The field returns to weeds, the institution returns to self-dealing, the body returns to fat, the language returns to grunting. Nothing good stays good by itself. Not a marriage, not a border, not a soul. And every generation meets the serpent again, undefeated, gnawing at the root of the world, because your grandfather's victory over it has expired the day that he died. Now, in a slightly less esoteric comparison that I'm drawing here, all of this probably sounds rather abstract, so to give you a feel for what it actually means, let me introduce to you the worst serpent of them all, because it isn't only out there, Carl Jung understood what the alchemists had known for a bit longer. The dragon sleeps in the psyche too. Your own dissolution, your own entropy. It is the resentment, the hedonistic appetite, the 1,000 small surrenders that you deliver throughout your life. The North had a nice story about that as well. See, Fafnir killed his own father for gold, dragged off the hoard into the wilderness and laid down on top of it to guard it. There he lay, guarding what he could not use, giving nothing, building nothing, spending himself on nothing, and he became the serpent, scale by scale. That is the fate of every man who declines the call to adventure. The serpent is not only the thing that you fight, it is something that you turn into if you refuse to become the sun. We are the first civilization to decide that the serpent doesn't really exist at all. Chaos, evil, decay, all superstition and social constructs to control people. Yeah, for sure. Everything is a system failure, a regulatory gap, a trauma response. There are no dragons anymore, only stakeholders and interest groups, right? The only problem with this is that a civilization that stops believing in evil doesn't really lose it. It stops producing the kind of men who could see it. And that puts the second piece on the table, the eye. Whoever can see the serpent, out there and in his own heart, is the only one who can even begin to fight it. So, who's standing at the tree, saving the world? We are, obviously. But not quite us yet. The tradition of our continent gives two answers. Together, they will piss off absolutely everyone and please nobody. This is how the development has to go. At least, it says so on my calendar. We start with the first facet, Thor. Odin is the god of kings, poets and the fallen elite, an aristocrat's god. Brilliant, but not entirely trustworthy, in our current situation at least. Especially considering that our elites are more, the Saturn enjoyer type. Thor is the god of everybody else, the farmer, the free man, the man, with a boundary stone and a family behind it. However much some of you would love to be part of an aristocratic class, the clearer it has to become that we haven't formed one yet. There has to be a foundation first, and for the modern man, this foundation does not get built out of cunning. What we need is a model that can genuinely get uncomfortable. Thus, Thor is the foundation. It's the initiation that modernity requires, the beginning of the sun. Courage is a practice, strength is a duty. The plain, unglamorous willingness to walk toward the thing that everyone else is running from. Thor's posture teaches the sun how to fight the serpent, with his body, with discipline, with a straight back and the chest out. None of that nose-picking dialectic. Just the uncomfortable acceptance of reality. There is no compromise available anymore. Either the hammer falls, or it doesn't. But Thor alone is incomplete, and the old Germanics knew it. That's exactly why their own story ends at Ragnarök. Strength answers the question of how. It cannot really answer the question of why. And a strength with no why eventually turns mercenary, or brutal, or just tired of it all, which is roughly where we are at today. What's now missing is the drive. Netflix, gaming and porn. Thor would have never walked towards the serpent for that. But as I said, this takes two things to be completed. And here we run into someone very familiar. It is Jesus Christ. And the objection comes immediately, and rightly so from some people. It'll be mainly the Nietzscheans. Christianity as slave morality, the revolt of the weak, resentment with a halo, the religion of the last shall be the first as a cosmic revenge fantasy of the losers. And yeah, as a diagnose of one very particular kind of Christian, Nietzsche was not wrong. The man was surrounded by specimens such as that, but for modern people, it is this moralizing, life-hating residue, the joy police, which today survives mostly as an HR department with incense. The institutional structure of the church looks fairly beyond saving, at least here in Europe. But what concerns us today is the figure at the center of the story, the figure of the Son. It describes a man who walks into Jerusalem knowing exactly what is waiting for him, who flips the tables of the money changers with a whip that he braided himself beforehand, who is offered an exit at every station of the ordeal and turns down every single one. It's the story of a man who takes onto himself the greatest load this world can place on a human being: betrayal, humiliation, torture and death, and accepts all of them without resentment. Not without pain, but without hatred. He does not curse the world that kills him, because he loves it. However hard you try to describe this differently, it's not slave morality, is it? It's sovereignty at maximum voltage. It's the camel as Nietzsche would describe it. It is amor fati, nailed to wood. and not just any wood. What we are looking at is the cross, the point where the vertical axis meets the horizontal one. What an image, huh? It's the strongest possible affirmation of existence, and don't you make it from a mountaintop in good weather. Loving your fate is something that any comfort-rotted 30-year-old child can manage on holiday with his unmarried childless partner. But the acceptance of life only means something when it's declared from the worst position on the board, and being nailed on a cross appears to be a rather bad position to be in. In the story, it is the highest there is, God himself, demonstrating it for us at the foot of the mountain. Even this I take up freely, he proclaims, and it is through this posture that he reaches the highest form from the lowest point. He completes the becoming of the Father, which is why Christ ascends after the sacrifice, not dead, for he cannot die. He lives forever, as a symbol of the completed becoming. Anyone who still reads this as slave morality really hasn't understood his own primary source. Anyway, it is in that posture that we find the synthesis. Thor and Christ are not rivals, they are two moments of the same archetype. Thor is the initiation of the sun, Christ is its completion. Thor teaches how to fight the serpent. Christ shows us why the fight is worth dying for. It is immortality earned, as a symbol for everyone who comes after you, to free the world. It is the individual that becomes more than a single life, and it shows what a man has to become, so that victory doesn't turn him into Fafnir on his pile of gold. The hammer forges the hero. The cross completes him. If he can make the passage into symbol after he's gone, it is to live so large that you go from son to father. That is the third piece. And it comes in two halves, the strength and the reason for it. The hammer and the why behind swinging it. Our European ancestors in their layered, converted, stubborn souls kept both in their hearts, and so do we. Which is why everyone who has followed this journey this far is feeling something by now. We are slowly straightening up, aren't we? So it takes strength and an accepting posture, but how do we actually embody that? For that, we need to look at two missteps first. The first one is fairly well known in modernity. Conquest is a dirty word now. Mastery, dominion, the will to reshape the world. The entire vocabulary is under moral quarantine, locked away by estrogen-soaked, softened man-children, whose time is slowly running out. What gets offered instead of dominion is the ethics of the small footprint. Minimize your impact, restrain your impulses, apologize for your appetite, tread lightly, and leave nothing behind, not even children. I've heard that one is bad for the environment. The ideal man of this age isn't evil, he's much worse. He is irrelevant. The mirror image, though, is just as dangerous. See, people hear what I'm saying about the burden and the sacrifice, and some may conclude that the point is to endure, teeth gritted, load on the shoulder, suffering nobly through the modern circus. The sun as a pack animal, the last stoic mule of the dying West. It cannot be that either. The truth is, you don't enter the world to endure it. You enter it to transform it. The sun is not the world's pack animal. He is its gardener. But before you can shape anything of worth, you have to conquer it. And we, my friends, have quite a lot to conquer. For that, though, you have to understand what conquest really means in the grammar of this archetype. Not dominion for its own sake, that would be Fafnir's road. And it has produced more than enough degeneracy out of that already. Conquest is the overcoming of whatever makes life smaller. The sun breaks what is crooked, because something straight can be built out of the pieces. It is the sole line pointed upwards, towards the ideal of the Father. You must not set yourself against the world, but you have to set yourself against what in it makes you smaller. To keep from losing yourself doing it, we need a fixed order of operations. First, you master yourself. For most people here, in fact, this will be the entire life's journey. The first territory lies behind our own eyes. The man who can't govern his appetites, his fears, his phone, and his temper, and reaches for the world anyway, becomes a tyrant. Self-overcoming first, world-overcoming second. That is the generational task for every one of you out there. The first break out of modernity has to be the chains of materialism. You have to orientate yourself towards something outside of yourself. Call it whatever you like. Get religious if you want. But there has to be something outside of us that you can measure yourself against. Your own principles won't do it in most cases. The individual is too isolated and too driven by modernity for that. Nietzsche and the Gospels are, for once, in perfect agreement here. Naturally out of this, however, follows the next step. See, when you hold conquest and burden together instead of choosing between them, the process fuses. To shoulder the world's weight is equally to conquer it. The disorder of the world yields to exactly one force alone: sustained, disciplined, and voluntary effort. To conquer the world rightly is to carry it rightly, which turns nearly everything that you defeat into something that you now have to maintain. The Serpent Slayer inherits the tree. Carrying and conquering are one motion. Whether it's an argument with a political opponent or an actual fight, the rule is to be as dangerous as possible, but only as cruel as necessary. And out of that motion comes an old name. It is love, not, as we understand it today, obviously, the warm slurry of affirmation, acceptance, and unconditional non-judgment. In truth, to love is to will the good of the other. The good, not the comfort, not the mood, not the self-image. And the moment that you accept that definition, every fight inverts. Real love demands. It demands excellence from you first, however. And then, because it refuses to lie, it will demand excellence from those that you love. The father raising his son loves him. The friend who tells you the truth about your life loves you. The man who holds his people to a standard that they're currently failing loves them more than the entire chorus telling them that they're oh so perfect, just the way they are. Today, most people are abandoned to their weakness, smiling, affirming, waving, while they go under in modernity. Love is merciful precisely because it refuses to play along with that. Here we are. The ticket out of modernity is the sun. He conquers the world because he loves it. The two things our culture has placed at opposite poles, love and conquest, tenderness and power, were never opposites naturally. They are the two hands of the same figure. One holds the world and the other one clears the serpent off it. That's our fourth component. It is the direction. You conquer out of love, and naturally, you start with yourself. A lot of you are going to find this next part rather hard to swallow, and there's a good reason for that. Your ideas make modern people angrier than original sin. And it's worth kind of asking why that is. See, original sin is the claim that we arrive in a world that is already burdened. We are already implicated in some fault before we've done anything at all. The modern mind finds this deeply outrageous. Nobody signed me up for anything. But you can also take this idea as an anthropology. See, what does the curse in Genesis actually entail? In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, thorns and thistles, all the days of thy life. In sorrow shalt thou bring forth children. Dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. Work, pain, death, and limitation. That is not really a theological accusation in the sense it's a situational report if we want to describe it as such. It describes the conditions of human life. And in fact, any great civilization carries the same structure at the base of their outlook. Buddha's first noble truth is the same telegram, from a different front. Existence is suffering. The Greeks packed it into tate matos, through suffering, understanding, just like the Norse did with Odin. The terms are universal, non-negotiable, and they were set before we arrived. None of us ever signed up to anything. Correct, the contract holds anyway. Thus, the only question really is not whether we carry the load. We will have to carry it. There's no real alternative to it. The question is rather how we carry it. It's a question of posture, and there are exactly two. The first posture is the modern one. It is resentment, the metaphysical lawsuit against existence itself. It's the flavor of our age. This shouldn't be happening to me. Someone arranged all of this. It's their fault. Yeah, we all know it. It is, by itself, the most natural reaction in the world. It may not even be wrong, because the world genuinely is unfair. But the suffering of the professional crybaby stays raw forever, because he refuses to digest what he has declared illegitimate. Those people carry the full weight, plus the extra weight of their own pitiful whining. But that's not even the worst of it. Standing next to the modern crybaby, as a rule, is the demagogue offering to represent him. It is a class action against the world. Every totalitarian movement of the last century staffed itself through this very exact recruitment office, be it fascism, communism, or the current libtard order. Against this stands the road that we have to choose. It's the natural counterposition. Pick the load up before it's imposed on you, voluntarily in advance, without resentment. Every problem is a challenge. Every crisis is an adventure worth having. This may sound a lot like Jordan Peterson, but washing your penis is not really part of the whole ordeal, although it will find its mention later on. As every small thing is a quiet prayer for a better tomorrow. In small matters, and large, life has to be understood as an invitation to play with reality. You won't always feel like it, but as long as you're already at it, you might still find it, the joy in being alive. And in that moment, something transforms in you. You can observe it in any action that you take if you accept this idea. It's the same objective suffering that the crybaby is experiencing, the same weight and the same death at the end. And yet, all of it changes state. Imposed suffering is humiliation. Voluntary suffering becomes meaning. The soldier and the prisoner can march the same distance in the same brain. They are not having the same experience. And the difference is nothing but posture. That is why every initiation ritual in history, the choreos in the wilderness that we have discussed in the Young People's episode, the fasting, the ordeals, the cold and the scars, all of that was built around chosen hardship. Because the people worked out early the one secret that modernity has spent a century trying to unlearn. Suffering that you choose transforms you. Suffering that you flee from deforms you. The cross is the principle at this absolute limit. A man who sees the worst suffering available coming toward him, who could sidestep it at any point, and who walks straight at it. It is the most voluntary death in the history of all stories. The most powerful being there is. God himself executed by his own creation. That doesn't describe victimhood in any ordinary sense. The cross is the total refusal to be a victim, even while being victimized. The transmutation of maximal imposed horror into maximal freely accepted meaning. And out of that, it conquered our continent. Not because the idea promised escape from suffering. Veganism had much prettier exits. Christianity, however, demonstrated publicly in its central figure that there is no load so heavy that a willing human being cannot pick it up as his own. We can see that just by looking around, in the negative sense of course. A culture that displays suffering everywhere and transforms it nowhere, wounds as credentials, grievance as currency, victim as status, as a career track with a pension attached. That's the cross turned upside down. Suffering exhibited for status instead of accepted for meaning. Maximum group hug, zero transformation. The sun, that is us, we have to go the other way. We stand in the same world, carry the same thorns and meet the same death. We sign the contract willingly that nobody ever put in front of us. And whoever does that becomes one of the few ones who are ever free of it. That's the fifth piece. It is the signature, the voluntary acceptance in advance of life without a grudge. Up to here, it's all been architecture, fine and good, but the practical question is still sitting in the room, isn't it? What do I actually do with all of this on Monday? The Greeks answered that exact question with a single word, arete. It usually gets translated as excellence, but what's meant really is something very specific, something load-bearing that our word has kind of lost. The arete is actually the fulfillment of what a thing is for in its highest form. The arete of a knife is cutting at a very sharp edge. The arete of a horse is to run, and the arete of a human being is to be, well, excellent at being a human. Sure, but what on earth is that supposed to mean, actually? Ask yourself back when you were small, whether you grew up with one parent or in an intact family. What is it that made certain people so much bigger than they physically were? It was when they were courageous, just, disciplined, wise, master of themselves. Not excellent at accumulating wealth, or excellent at doing something specifically, but it was instead excellent at being. It is a person's worth, on this accounting that isn't measured by what he has, but rather by what he is left with when you take everything away from him. It is the beautiful classical virtues that really aren't a random catalogue here. They fit like a training plan onto everything that we have collected today. Courage is Thor's virtue, the how of the fight. Justice is the father's measure, carried in our own chest. The soul line running toward the mountain. Temperance and self-command are the conquest of the first territory, our minds. It is mastery of ourselves. Prudence means knowing which serpent to fight and when, and running through all of them is the one virtue that the Greeks still kind of lacked a word for, and the cross supplied. It is humility, the knowledge that you serve the standard, and the standard does not serve you. It's the orientation towards something outside of yourself, which is the whole reason that I'm taking you on this journey and producing this video. We need values and structures that exist outside of us and outside the state. Denying those will make the entire structure tip over. Courage will curdle into brutality, justice into vengeance, discipline into vanity. Humility is what stops the dragon slayer from moving into the dragon's cave. The word for a man who carries these virtues used to be noble, and that idea is one that we have to bring back to life. Egalitarian modernity libtardism turned it into an insult. Nobility as privilege, hierarchy as oppression, excellence itself as a form of violence against the mediocre or the retarded. It is the leveling instinct, the crab bucket sanctified into ethics. Under this regime, the tall poppy learns to slouch. We all know this. It's the world that we live in. Everything pressed together into one interchangeable mass. Facing it is the modern caricature of the real thing. And by that, I mean plenty of people on our own side. The costume aristocracy. The guys posting Greek statues at 2 in the morning from the bottom of a bag of chips. Nobility as an aesthetic, a vibe. Hey, no offense, the vibe is genuinely nice, but it has to be more than that. It is inheritance claimed. Installments, however, are often never paid. As such, against both of those positions stands the tradition's actual teaching, the thing that I'm trying to sell to you. And it's much more radical than either position. True aristocracy is not inherited privilege. That is, as I said, a caricature. It is instead inherited responsibility, realized through virtue. The real nobleman was never defined by what he was owed. He was defined instead by what he owed the world. First into battle, last out of the famine. His own name staked as collateral on his own conduct. Blood alone could hand a man the account, but only his own conduct could pay into it. And the nobility that stops paying in becomes what the European nobility eventually became, a costume over an empty vault. That's why it fell, deservedly so. Which leaves us with a problem for our understanding of aristocracy, because it's neither egalitarian nor is it exclusionary. It is in fact aristocracy with an open door. Nobility is a rank that anyone can earn and nobody inherits finished. It's conduct, compounded daily. The man in the warehouse who keeps his word, governs his appetites and trains his body, holds his post and raises his children towards the standard. That man is much more noble, in the strict classical sense, than 100 heirs and every verified clown on Twitter. What I present here is an understanding of aristocracy open to anyone willing to pay the price, which, naturally, will be very few. It's the attempt to form a materialized mass back into an awake elite with a spine, and that puts the sixth final piece on the table. It is craftsmanship. The nobility isn't ancestry. Nobility is virtue, practiced daily and pressed into the world as symbol, with enough grace that the ones after you, the small little ones, want to step into your footprints. These 6 pieces are lying in front of us now. The assignment, the eye, the strength and its reason, the direction, the signature, the craft. On their own, they're nice thoughts. Assembled, they add up to what I promised at the start. It is a posture, and on Monday morning, when the alarm goes off, it will look roughly like this. You take the world as it is, broken, unfinished, but addressed to you. No grieving over the world you didn't get, so that it might yet become the one that your children deserve. You keep your eyes open. The serpent is always working, in the country, in the institutions, but most importantly, in your own chest. Whoever can't see it gets eaten. Whoever feeds it too long becomes it. Anywhere the world is out of order, anywhere something makes itself known, even the small pen that rolled behind the desk and has been lying there for 2 weeks, even that. It is small acts that mean a great deal when they are carried out from a large posture. To take up that posture, you have to build up strength and understand the reason behind it. The body gets trained, the discipline gets held, but with a why behind it. Because strength alone without any why turns mercenary, brutal or tired, and we cannot afford that anymore. Because you love the world, and by demanding love from yourself first, then from the people who belong to you, you can actually change a great deal. But this also means no comfort for the world too. It is the rain during your workout outdoors that will start to get laughed at, not complained about, because the world just handed you another worthy challenge. And as such, it is your duty to accept this challenge voluntarily. It follows out of this position that the most unpleasant task of the day goes first, whatever it happens to be. The load picked up before it's imposed on you. That is the entire difference between humiliation and meaning. But don't you overestimate yourselves. Sometimes, especially for the normal person, the heaviest load is something absurdly small. tidying your room, emptying the dishwasher. Jordan Peterson would say, cleaning your penis. Well, we're all at different stages of the journey, and yours is allowed to be a small one. This is about posture, not directly about the result, and by orientating yourself accordingly, you leave everything richer than you have found it. The day, the room, the people in it, and, not to be forgotten, yourself. This has to be the ground posture of anyone who dares to actually improve something in the world. Not here and there in the abstract, but concretely in the world and the surroundings that he actually lives in. People will see it on you. You'll suddenly be drawing strength out of the problems that come at you. No program, no membership, no 10-point plan. What this has to be about first is a posture, a standard that we can commit each other to again. You can put it on tomorrow morning and nobody can take it away from you, because it really is an obligation. You can only notice it. And when you find yourself asking whether what you're doing is right, imagine yourself as your own son or daughter. Would you look up to yourself and see the hero of your story? You know exactly what I mean. Now to close, I would like to widen the lens one last time, because what happens when it isn't just one person carrying this posture, but an entire people? Generation after generation, there's a very forgotten name, completely forgotten in fact, and lost. The name for such a community is a civilization. Think about what we actually are standing on, not as an abstraction, but as a physical fact of reality. The road that you drove on today was built by men who are most likely gone. The understanding of violence that tries to keep itself in check was hammered out in Europe in arguments and battles between men whose names you will never learn. The language that you're thinking in right now was polished for 100 generations by the dead, from Tyndale and Shakespeare down to people who never touched a book in their lives. Look at the things that we once built. As a German, Cologne Cathedral stands tall. The foundation stone was laid in 1248. Completed was the cathedral in 1880, more than 600 years in between. And for roughly 400 of them, the medieval crane stood more or less idle, the landmark of a city that hadn't made good on its promise yet. The mason who set the first foundations knew, with absolute certainty, that he would never see the roof, nor would his son. His grandson might not even see the scaffolding come down. He set the stones anyway, and he set them true, because the building wasn't for him. It was for the ones still to come. It was for you. That's the posture, isn't it? Cast in stone, civilization is crystallized sacrifice. Every institution that works, every field that yields, every stable family, every symphony ever heard, every border that held, all of it is the hardened form of some son's freely accepted burden. Some man or woman paid the full price for the goods they would never collect. Civilization isn't a machine that runs on resources necessarily. Civilization is an inheritance that runs on heroes, and it is always, at every single moment, exactly one ungrateful generation away from the weeds, because the serpent does not stay dead. Every inheritance decays if nobody renews it. Every dawn has to be fought for again. The priests of Egypt understood that better than we do, which is why conservative or right-wing, for that matter, is actually a rather silly position. Even the straw men that they build for you as a traditionalist isn't enough, as if you wish to go back to the future. Preservation alone is just slow capitulation, with better manners, isn't it? The task is the following: to leave the world richer than you found it, and not merely materially. That is the least of it, the lowest layer. It has to be morally richer, more men who keep their word. Culturally richer, something made that wasn't there before. Spiritually richer, through children that are raised toward the standard instead of running away from it. The inheritance is not a lawn that you maintain. The inheritance is capital that you invest, actually, at your own expense, for heirs that you will never meet. The currency of the world is life and time. The father calls from above, the son answers on the ground. He departs, faces the serpent, masters himself, lifts the load freely, turns suffering into meaning, love into conquest, conduct into nobility. And what does his finished work amount to? Well, he becomes the very ground. His struggle hardens, and he becomes the foundation that the next generation stands on, without ever knowing his name. How will that inherited order appear to them? As the given, as the law, as the vertical axis, as the father. The son who completes his arc becomes the father in death for those who come after him. the circle closes, one turn higher than it began, because he left everything richer, which, in terms of how time works, isn't really a circle or cyclical in that sense, right? We are in the Kali Yuga, but that's not quite exactly fitting. It is rather a spiral. It is this exact position that makes the utopians and escape artists of our era hate my position so much. The answer to a broken world is not to flee upward out of it into pure spirit or communism or whatever floats your boat. It isn't really to force it into some final perfected state where history stops. The world is not a prison to escape and not a problem to solve. The world is an inheritance that you carry forward, and the carrying is itself the meaning, all the way down and all the way up. Thor gets 9 steps. 9 steps after the greatest victory in his mythology, and then he dies. And the Norse, not really a sentimental people in that regard, told this ending for centuries, because they understood that it isn't a tragedy in that sense. It is the price for being alive. It's actually a privilege. The chance to be completed by your own passing, by ending. We will all get our own 9 steps one day. Everything that we have built, everything that we will eventually have, will be set down. The serpent's venom has been in the contract the whole time. Well, ever since we snuck out of the garden, it would appear. The question is whether the serpent is dead when we do, and whether the ground that we fall on can hold somebody else up afterward. On the morning after Ragnarok, the sons of the gods walked out in the new grass, and there, gleaming in the light of the new sun, they found the golden game pieces of their fathers, the inheritance, waiting on the far side of the end of the world. Something survives the fall of every world. Something gets handed on that is neither the father's law nor the son's struggle, the living breath that moves between generations, the fire that leaps from the dead to the unborn. And that is a thought for another day. One last thing, however, on my own behalf. These videos take an enormous amount of time and work. Since I've been asked more than once now, I've actually set up a Patreon and started a Substack where you can more or less read all of my entries in a bit more condensed form and maybe with a bit less rambling. If you enjoy my work and want to support it, feel free to toss a coin my way. As a small thank you, there will be all sorts of small little goodies, plus access to my music. And with that, I thank you for your time.